Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. So today, I actually want to talk about something that's been burning me inside these recent weeks/months. So not so long ago, I made a video talking about how the PlayStation 5 Slim was taking away your ownership of the console by introducing an online requirement in order to use the detachable Blu-ray drive, which I find to be very scammy and anti-consumer. In fact, while we're on this subject, I just want to make one thing clear. The main issue with this online requirement isn't so much the fact that an internet is required. I'm pretty sure the vast majority of people who purchase a PlayStation 5 probably have some access to the internet, even if it means using their mobile data. The problem is really with the servers that the console has to connect to in order to verify the integrity of the disk drive. Because years or decades down the line, if Sony decides to shut down those servers, which is not unlikely, Microsoft did the same thing with their DRM cancer that was Game for Windows Live, and when that happens, your console is essentially just a $500 brick. People have also brought attention to the soldered SSD, but honestly that's not as much of a big deal. People have found ways to replace it, you just have to send it to the right repairman. The online check with the disk drive, on the other hand, that's an unavoidable issue, and it's one of those things that it forces you to become more dependent to the manufacturer's goodwill, which is something that I don't think any consumer should ever be forced to do. But anyway, I received a lot of stupid comments in that video, and to be honest, I was kind of willing to let that go. But there's something that happened very recently that actually really pissed me off. Now, there's this website that I'm a pretty big fan of called DoesItPlay. Basically, the entire basis behind this website is they purchase physical copies of video games, exclusively play the version 1 build of the game that comes with the disc, and test to see if the game is playable or not, which to me is very useful as someone that buys physical games. For example, every time I learned that a game doesn't run without a download, I would just outright not buy the game, or maybe I'll just exclusively buy the PC version, because if I have to download something from the internet, to me, that makes the physical copy kinda useless, which is one of the main reasons for why I don't have an Xbox console as an example. Because in recent years, their first party games don't have the full game on the disc, so at that point, I might as well just buy the same game on Steam. But that's besides the point. Now recently, there's been this huge controversy with PlayStation delisting content from Discovery, which fucking wow! It's almost as if we've been warning people about this for years. But anyway, everyone made videos about this, including ReviewTechUSA. Now I'm gonna be completely honest, I didn't exactly have the most favorable opinion of this channel prior to this controversy.
In 2011, PlayStation Network was down for almost a month. Remember, you had all the executives bowing and apologizing for it, and yeah, you couldn't go online at all because of the severity of the hack. Now, the severity of this hack is not as bad, but this shouldn't happen at all. It just shouldn't happen. And the thing about it is, you pay, again, I cannot stress this enough, and I won't let it go. You pay extra to be on Xbox Live or Xbox Game Pass, whatever the hell you want to say, and PlayStation Network or PlayStation Plus. I'm covering all my bases in case I say the wrong thing. And what are you getting?
Dude, did you not read the fucking article that you just sourced? This hack they're referring to affected their employees, not their users. Whether or not they charge you to play online has nothing to do with this incident. I guarantee you that if you're a PlayStation Plus member, you are not affected by this hack. Listen, I get that you're pissed that you have to pay in order to play online, we all are, but you gotta understand that this is not even remotely the same as the hack that occurred back in 2011, like not even close. But anyway, getting back on topic, DoesItPlay made a tweet to ReviewTechUSA stating that, hey, it's probably not for the best that a channel of your side is spreading around the idea that physical games are incomplete without an update, and what they're saying here is completely true.
I've shown this before. You buy a game now, the game is just essentially a placeholder. That's all it is. You don't. When you buy a game physically, if you're lucky, you may just get an unfinished version of the game that might be playable but broken. A lot of times you get these games home, you gotta get like a 50 gigabyte update or 20 gigabyte update. So the games that you get, I don't have a PlayStation 5 game or Series X game around me, is a coaster unless you get the updates.
You see, this is where ReviewTechUSA is actually wrong. Now here's the thing, I'll be the first to say that I definitely do agree that nowadays the standards of game releases have gotten worse. Companies today feel way too comfortable releasing broken, unfinished games with incomplete features with the expectation that it'll get patched in the future. This is a real issue, and it's actually one of the main reasons for why I don't play live service games, which is where this type of tumor is often found, and I've also refused to buy certain single player games. For example, everyone keeps recommending Cyberpunk 2077 to me, and I'm sure it's gotten a lot better since the launch, but I just don't trust CD Projekt Red anymore after that disastrous and borderline fraudulent release back in late 2020. Any company that believes it's okay to sell a game in that laughable state is not a company that I trust in any way whatsoever, and I'm never gonna trust them after that. No matter how many times people convince me that it's gotten better since then, I cannot forgive them, and as a result, I will never buy Cyberpunk. The same is true for Jedi Survivor. It recently got a 60 FPS patch on consoles, which is cool, but the initial build is still awful, and it doesn't even come with the full game anyway. So, fuck EA, I'm not buying this game. So, trust me when I say that I 100% understand the concern that many people have in which games are coming out unoptimized with the expectation that it'll get patched later down the line. And I hate that, I really do. But despite that, I also would say that people really overblow how bad the version 1 build often is, because in all actuality, the vast majority of games out there, especially single player games, are playable without a patch. I think a lot of people just buy games, install them, see an update queued for download, and automatically assume that the game needs the update in order to work. But more often than not, they don't actually need it. Which then brings me to a little side tangent that I want to transition to. There's this one comment that really fucking pissed me off because it comes from someone who thinks they know what the fuck they're talking about. Listen to this. Games on console or PC haven't run off of the disc since the PlayStation 3/360 era. You think you own a game when it's on a disc, and games haven't run off of disc since 2012. It's 2023. Oh boy. Okay, since I'm going to assume that you're not particularly smart or informed when it comes to this, let me explain to you why you do in fact own the game when you buy it physically. Whether or not you play it off of the disc does not matter. What matters is the fact that when you buy a physical copy, the disc has the game data on it, and you can copy it to your console without ever needing to download anything. People seem to have this weird disassociation where they equate installation with download. Well, that's not true. When you buy a PlayStation 4 or 5 disc, you're not buying a fucking product key or a serial number that you redeem on your account. It literally has the game on it. You can verify this every time you insert the disc on a console. It will tell you how much data it contains. You just have to install it on the console, and every time you open the game, you need to have the disc inside the console in order to confirm that you actually own the game and you didn't just install it from someone else's disc. And I've proven this in the past. Here I am, showing you a live feed of me installing Code Vein while my PS5 is completely disconnected from the internet. Where do you think it's installing the data from? It can't download it if it doesn't have an active network. It's obviously copying it from the disc. That's the thing about physical copies that grant you more ownership compared to digital copies from the online store. Because Sony, even if they fucking wanted to, they can't do anything to revoke my access to the physical game. They can't barge into my apartment and take my disc. They can't remotely block my access to the game when it doesn't even require an internet connection in the first place. The game is mine, and if I wanted to, I could lend it or even sell it as a used copy, which unironically would cripple their sales because it means that the buyer doesn't have to purchase it from an official retailer or their online store. And you know what? If Sony and these gaming companies have a problem with that, they can go fuck themselves. That's my right as the owner of the physical copy. So it's completely irrelevant if the game is running off of the disc or not. Like, what exactly are you asking? Do you want games to run at like 40 megabytes per second? Do you want abysmal loading screens, shitty depth of field, and constant texture pop-ins? Or are you asking for Blu-rays to be as fast as NVMe SSDs? Do you have any idea how fucking expensive video games would become as a result of that? People already complain when they have to pay $10 extra as the new standard for newly released games. I guarantee you that if physical copies had SSDs levels of speed, they would be way more expensive than what we currently have. It's just a lot more efficient to just distribute the game data on a cheap Blu-ray disc and then just install it on a faster hard drive. It just makes more sense. You don't have to worry as much about manufacturing costs and also some of the I/O bottlenecks that come as a result from running games off of an external media. He also mentions the fact that the online check is there to prevent unauthorized disk drives from being attached to the consoles, and that it's not a big deal because it's a one-time check. Except, it's actually not. There are actually some scenarios where you have to do the online check again. For example, if you swap the drive or if you perform a factory reset. Now, is that something that you're gonna end up doing very frequently? Probably not, But again, it's not the fact that I have to connect to the internet, it's the fact that I'm reliant on a server that I have no idea if or when it will stop getting maintained. Maybe one day when this console is no longer getting supported, Sony might release a patch that eliminates the online check, but call me a huge nag, I don't fucking trust Sony! The same company that installed fucking rootkits into people's computers without their consent. They're the last company I will ever trust in doing the right thing. So, fuck the PlayStation 5 Slim, it is a scam, and if this is how the PlayStation 6 will also operate, I'm not buying a PlayStation console ever again. I'll just play Muse Dash on my PC until the world gets blown up. So, here's another comment that also fucking annoyed me. Disc preservation is less important than game preservation. We should focus on making games available DRM free regardless of format. Buddy, in the world of console, disc preservation is preservation. There is no DRM free with PlayStation or Xbox, certainly not Nintendo. It's not like you can buy PlayStation 5 games on GOG or something like that. Oh no, you have one store that these companies have full control of, and even if you wanted to install them on an external disk, you have to format it into a hard-locked, barely decryptable partition that the idea of DRM free with video game consoles is just silly. Unless you mean that we should primarily focus on circumventing DRM on PC, that makes more sense, and I actually do agree that in general PC is an easier platform to preserve games. But what about games that don't have a PC port? Like, one of my favorite games released during the PlayStation 4 generation is Sakura Wars. This thing doesn't have a PC port, so if I'm gonna buy this, of course I'm gonna buy the physical copy. What about a certain Magical Virtual On? Not only does this thing not have a PC port, but this thing isn't even available in an online digital store. It got axed due to licensing issues. How the fuck are you gonna preserve this? The answer is by buying the physical copy, which I did. Optical media is obsolete for most purposes, and we cannot expect consoles to have disk drives forever. I just love how gamers are so quick to discard the concept of physical media, meanwhile music fans are still buying vinyl records. It's like the concept of collecting physical tangible goods is just alien to a lot of people, which I just find to be very sad. Consoles today are now primarily used to access subscription services like Game Pass and PlayStation Plus. Now that, my friend, is complete nonsense. I don't know where this person is getting this idea from, but if you actually look at the published data, PlayStation makes way more money with things such as game sales and in-game content compared to the subscriptions. There's a reason for why they don't make the first-party games available on PlayStation Plus day one. There's a reason for why they've publicly renounced the subscription-based model, because when it comes to making a bag, they know exactly what they're doing. I just find it absurd, the idea that video game companies are releasing their games with the expectation that most people aren't going to buy the copies for the current consoles, even though that's where the majority of the player base is at, especially normies. Like, normies are not buying fucking $2,000 PCs and like getting their games there. No, they get a PS5 or an Xbox Series X, and then they buy FIFA and Call of Duty every year. That's most people. Anyway, this is the last comment. I hear you, but we are literally in a global crisis and need to use less material. Digital and cloud are the only ways to preserve this planet. Now, something that I really hate about this argument is the implication that cloud solutions aren't also detrimental to the environment, even though you can easily do some basic research and learn that data hoarding can also be pretty harmful to the environment. Not only does it require natural material to build data centers and maintain them, but it's also been well documented issues pertaining to carbon emissions. Additionally, I would go as far as to say that these companies, what they're doing right now, is actually more harmful to the environment simply because of the planned obsolescence with these blocks of hardware, with how they're purposefully designed to be difficult to repair, and with them also becoming more reliant on the internet, meaning that as soon as they stop maintaining the servers that help operate some of the functionalities, such as doing an online check to verify the integrity of the disk drive, then every PlayStation 5 Slim out there in the market will become fucking e-waste. How is that not worse? At least if I buy a physical copy of a game, the disc is gonna work as long as I maintain it properly. Discs are a lot more resistant than you think. You have to be a complete numbskull to actually damage it to a point where they stop working. Plus, I can sell it later down the line, which can revitalize its value. Meanwhile, online-based content have an expiration date. Once they stop maintaining them, they're basically extinct. They'll only exist in our memories, so all of those natural resources that they consume in order to maintain the servers, plus the material used to manufacture the consumer hardware that has become nothing more than a block of paperweight, they just went to complete waste. But anyway, I think I've done enough to respond to my comments. I want to get back to talking about ReviewTechUSA because he did something that I found to be really fucking scummy. Now, you might have seen this clip from his stream.
But I will pay you to get any single fucking game from the store that doesn't have a multi-gigabyte update. I'll pay them $2,000. $2,000, get a game from the store, DoesItPlay, that doesn't require an update.
Now, the funny thing about this is that this was very easy to debunk. Now, DoesItPlay gave the example of Super Mario RPG, a game that at the time of the tweet's existence did not have any patch available. Now, eventually ReviewTechUSA did pay the $2,000, which I'll give him credit for. He certainly was a man of his word. However, the issue with this game being used as an example is that Super Mario RPG actually does have a game-breaking bug that's scheduled to be patched at some point in the future. Now, the thing is, this is not necessarily a prevalent bug. A lot of people actually didn't even experience this, although very soon I'll explain why this actually isn't even really all that relevant. So, ReviewTechUSA made a response video addressing a couple of things, many of which I found to be uncharitable or just downright misleading.
Here is a clip that they retweeted from a troll, which isn't necessarily professional of them, a known troll by the way of mine. Maybe you should have looked into that. You're a company that prides yourself on researching things like games. Maybe not retweet a troll?
Listen, I'm just gonna be upfront. I don't give a fuck if the dude is a troll or not. If they made a good point, they made a good point. No one should do fucking research on your channel's history with trolls before we address a subject that even you admitted that you are wrong about.
There are games that don't need updates, but the one they showed, they were wrong about, and that was Super Mario RPG. They said that, look, here's a AAA game that doesn't need an update day one. It works right out of the box. Except for the fact that it has a game-breaking bug, Super Mario RPG. Now, I know there's a workaround that you could restart the area and get through that game-breaking bug, but really? Like, the example you show me to get money out of my pocket is a game that, with evidence, has a game-breaking bug in it. Okay.
Except that wasn't the only game that they showed as an example. They showed to you 4 other games, and you know that because you quote tweeted them. It is true that the game they used as the initial example was wrong, but I'm gonna chalk that up to them probably just not being aware of this issue, because again, not everyone experienced this bug. There are plenty of comments of people stating that they played the game just fine. Now, were they lucky? Probably yeah, but it still proves that it's very much possible for you to experience the game without bugging you out of playing it. And that's just one game. What about the other 4 ones? Or hell, I would even go as far as to include games that, even though they do have updates, they still work perfectly fine without a patch. Speaking from experience, the games that I've bought for the Switch work without any patch. And I'm sure you're probably wondering why I would play games unpatched. The thing is, my Switch is jailbroken. And one of the downsides of running custom firmware on your Switch is that if Nintendo detects that you're running unsigned code on your system, they will essentially break your console and force you to reboot it, which ends up trapping you in an endless loop. And the only way to prevent this from happening is either turn on airplane mode and never connect to the internet, or you can just simply block Nintendo servers with certain tools, which is what I've done. Now, the issue with either option is that you can't download anything from Nintendo servers, including game patches. Now, there are ways that you can technically do it using third-party sources, but I just don't bother with them and resort to just playing the unpatched builds. And they run fine. Like, yes, it is true that more often than not, the patches do improve the experience. They fix bugs, they smooth out the frame rates, and in some cases of long-term support, they also provide new content. I agree with that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the version 1 build is unplayable. Like, I was reading tweets from people making a huge deal for what are often pretty minor bugs and frame rate issues they encounter with the vast majority of games out there with the original build. Like, dude, are we really gonna pretend like this has never been an issue in the past? Have you tried playing GTA 4, Red Dead Redemption 1 on a PlayStation 3? Are you seriously gonna tell me those games have smooth frame rates? Have you tried playing Need for Speed Most Wanted on a fucking GameCube? or even on the Xbox 360. Hell, if we're talking about game-breaking bugs, bro, there was this one time I was playing Yakuza Dead Souls, and after an explosion, it just crashed my system and I had to hard reboot it. Like, don't get me wrong, lack of optimization with modern games is a real issue. Don't get the impression that I believe otherwise. And there definitely are some games that are just downright impossible to recommend without a patch. Sometimes not even really because they're broken. For example, with most fighting games, even though they're completely playable offline, I would still generally recommend downloading the updates because fighting games are often treated like live services, with constant balance updates and inclusion of new characters through DLCs. There are definitely some games where you really do need to update them, and even the ones that aren't entirely necessary, you might as well just update them for the fuck of it, like you're not missing out on anything if you do so. But when it comes to single player games, are we seriously going to get super nitpicky with like minor performance issues? Like, really, that alone will convince you not to buy a physical copy? Like, come on.
I technically was wrong. I admit it. I offer the money. But after I kind of start pointing out their mistakes, that's actually what made them say, nah, you know what, we're good. No, well, you could keep your money. I know they'll flip it and say that I was being a spoiled sport on Twitter, but money's green. Just take the money and just don't talk about it.
I love how his main issue is the fact that they decided to refund the money after the example was proven wrong, which, by the way, I don't actually think that's the reason they refunded. It might have played a role in their decision, but really, I just think they felt bad about engaging in this type of drama and decided to walk away. Because at the end of the day, they're not drama tubers. Their main goal is to simply inform people what they can expect when they purchase physical media. So they probably just realized that this controversy was perhaps a bit too out of line for them, especially because it involved money, and decided to walk away. But let's say you are right and they refunded it because their example was wrong. Why are you complaining? It means they admitted their fault. Just take the money back and fucking move on. At the end of the day, it still doesn't make you correct, because there are still games that don't require updates, which they showed it to you. Funny how you didn't include them in the video, even though you definitely saw them.
And they're very weird with what they consider playable. For example, they consider Cyberpunk 2077 for the PS4, or just in any case in its original state, playable. This is what they wrote on their website. Possibly one of the buggiest and most unstable disk build we have ever tested. Frame rate is terrible. Popping is so bad that oftentimes you'll have to stand in place for 30 seconds to wait for interiors to load, and otherwise you'll fall through the floor. They're saying this game is playable offline from the disk. It is still completely possible to finish the game unpatched, although it is highly recommended to not even attempt it unless you want an extreme patience test. So why would you say to people that this game is playable?
Okay, so out of curiosity, I decided to Control F the term playable, only to realize that it's not written anywhere on the page. Now, I'm gonna be charitable and assume that he might be referring to a tweet where they might have described the game as playable, but even if that's the case, you know what? I agree. Cyberpunk, at least the base campaign, technically is playable. Because in my opinion, I would describe unplayable a game that quite literally cannot be played without any kind of download, either because the disc doesn't have the full game, aka Xbox first party games. The game might have a severe bug that causes it to either crash or not boot up, making it literally unplayable, like Assassin's Creed Origins with the unpatched build when you play it on PS5. Or maybe the game is online only and you can't play it without being connected to the internet. Cyberpunk, technically speaking, doesn't fit any of those categories. You can play the game from start to finish. Now granted, it's awful, irredeemably awful, and I think it should be downright illegal for games to be released in those states, but you can still play the campaign from beginning to end. You shouldn't, but you can. Now, the other issue that I have with ReviewTechUSA using this example is that if you just read the page, it clearly states download required. So I don't know why he's acting as if DoesItPlay are endorsing the physical release of this game, as if all the problems they listed aren't a clear indication that this is a terrible deal.
Why would you do that? It absolutely makes no sense. If anything, by you doing this, you're encouraging developers to say, hey, if the game's broken but you could get through it, it's okay to put it on the disc. To me, if anything, that's kind of anti-game preservation.
No, they're renouncing these practices, you fucking idiot. The entire point of their existence is to showcase the problems that come with playing an unpatched version of Cyberpunk. Like, it's very obvious you don't know what you're talking about. DoesItPlay has repeatedly called out companies for releasing broken builds. Spider-Man 2 is a game that honestly isn't even that bad with its unpatched build compared to some other games, but they still call them out for all of its issues. Deservedly so, because that's the entire ethos of their website. If you genuinely believe that they advocate for broken releases, either you're being intentionally dishonest or you just don't know what you're talking about.
They also consider Batman Arkham Trilogy out of the box for the Nintendo Switch playable. This is what they said. No download codes, yes, but Batman Arkham City and Knight are both stub apps on the cartridge, requiring you to download both games via an update. Both games only contain a message telling you to download the update if you boot them without it. Okay. Batman Arkham Asylum is complete on cart and there are no updates available at the time of testing. Game suffers from some very frequent and noticeable frame drops when playing via docked mode. Handheld mode mostly runs okay, but there are still some occasional drops. All DLC included on the cart. And with Arkham City, even though it's not included on the cart, so it's not a complete game, it runs like crap if you are in the Batmobile. Playable.
Call off your men, Jim.
Golf Oscar 5-6, this is Commissioner Gordon. I'm calling off the pursuit. It's too dangerous.
Sir, we're right here. We can take these bastards. What the? They just fired an RPG at us. What the hell are these guys?
5-6, pull back now. That's an order.
Okay, first of all, that's not Arkham City, that's Arkham Knight. Secondly, do you remember the launch of Arkham Knight, specifically the PC port? Dude, everyone complained about the fact that the game ran like hot garbage. This is a known fact about this game. Now, I'm not saying it's acceptable to launch the game at this state, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, what the fuck were you expecting? In fact, I'm gonna go as far as to wager that this game will never be fixed. Even if it gets patched later down the line and the performance improves like marginally, it's probably still going to have performance issues. Thirdly, I love how he fixated on the one game where they didn't even bring up in the page because they almost exclusively talk about Arkham Asylum, which is the only game that comes included in the cartridge. So why the fuck would they review Arkham City and Arkham Knight when the entire basis around the website is reviewing the unpatched builds that come directly from the physical copies? Fourthly, once again, read the part of the page where it says download required. Yes, this is crucial information that they explicitly mention on their page, and yet ReviewTechUSA is acting as if they're calling this a playable copy. Like, the level of intellectual dishonest or just downright stupidity found in this video is genuinely disgusting. By the way, just another fact, they did complain about the performance issues. You would have known that if perhaps you had done more research on who they are, and if you don't want to do research, then genuinely shut the fuck up. You had a bad take about physical media, just take the L and move on. For fuck's sake, man, you're a grown ass fucking adult. I think in the end, what truly troubles me is just how quickly people are willing to abandon any semblance of ownership of a game just because you need to install updates to run better. Like, I really want you to take a step back and really think about what you're saying. You're telling me that having a tangible disc with an existing build of a game that you can sell, you can archive, you can choose to play it over any updated builds, which sometimes actually works for the best, like in the case of Assassin's Creed Unity, where playing the original build gives you 60 FPS. If of course you're playing on a PS5, unlike with later builds where they lock the frame rate to 30. You're telling me that all of these rights that are given to you as the proprietor of the consumer product are just as worthless as playing a version of the game that requires the internet to verify its integrity. You don't have access to the original build if you purchase it prior to getting update. It can be revoked from you if the game gets delisted or if your account gets banned. You're telling me that a physical copy is just as worthless as an online digital copy just because you have to update it in order to improve the experience? Are you fucking kidding me? You know, let me share my personal story with physical games. You see, I wasn't always that much of an advocate of physical media. I used to kind of be on the same side as a lot of these people. I used to think that discs were a dying medium and that digital games were more convenient than physical media. But there were two events that made me change my mind. The first was that over time, I started to notice that a lot of the streaming platforms that I paid for were continuously removing content that I relied on to the point where I just gave up and started buying Blu-rays instead. But the other thing that influenced my stances was when the 9.00 exploit came out for the PlayStation 4. You see, I'm a pretty big fan of jailbreaking consoles. I've done it with my PlayStation 3, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation Vita, still not my PlayStation 2, but don't worry, I'll get there. And at some point in time, I considered jailbreaking my PlayStation 4. But the reason for why I ended up not doing that is because I noticed a very critical mistake that I'd made, which was the fact that the vast majority of my PlayStation 4 library was digital. And one thing you need to understand about jailbreaking is that if possible, never connect your account to an exploited console. And I certainly wasn't going to do that with my personal PSN account, especially with Sony's history of banning people's accounts for running on a jailbroken PlayStation 3. Now, I hadn't heard any reports of that happening with the PS4, but I wasn't going to take my chances. And that's of course assuming that I would even be able to connect to the servers in the first place, because bear in mind that when you're running older firmware, more often than not, the online functionalities on your console eventually become more limited the more outdated your firmware becomes. And so to me, this was pretty much my wake-up call. Once I realized just how much I was limiting myself by exclusively purchasing digital games, I stopped doing it because that's what you subscribe to every time you buy digital games. I've said this a couple of times, you're not paying to own these titles, you're paying them to control you. You're essentially giving them ammunition to use your library of games as ransom to force you into behaving the way they want. Sony did that to me with the PlayStation 4. At this point, I legitimately feel threatened by them. I feel genuine fear that if I decide to modify the console to my heart's content, my ability to play the games that I spend a lot of money on is in jeopardy. And that's not a position that you should be in as a consumer. You should value your rights. You should have the ability to claim ownership of the thing you bought and use it however way you want. But that's a right that you immediately sacrifice when you buy digital games, because now you have to abide by abusive terms and conditions. Another thing that I love about jailbreaking consoles is the fact that you can also archive your games. That's what I do every time I buy a PlayStation 3 game. Could I find pirated copies of the same games on the internet? Probably, but honestly, I like dumping my own games. It's safer because I frankly don't trust most sites out there that host game ROMs, but it also serves as a fallback in case I need to dump the game again. Maybe I lost my archive or it got corrupted in some way or another. Thanks Windows 11. In those instances, it's good to have the original copy ready to be dumped. There are also some consoles where I might not feel comfortable pirating, like the Nintendo Switch. It's frankly too recent for me to morally justify pirating games, so to ease up my mind, I just buy the physical copies, specifically the ones that don't require any downloads, and then I dump them and use them for emulation. I do the same thing with my anime Blu-rays. I back them up using MakeMKV, and just like that, I have the best versions of the series with better codecs than any of the ones present in the streaming services that you pay for. And if I wanted to go even crazier, I can even upscale them to 4K using open source software. That's the beauty of physical media. It's removing the dependency on these companies that want nothing more than to control you, which is why we need to champion physical media, as well as DRM-free media, of course. I love GOG. I think they're doing an awesome thing to the industry. Fuck, I've repurchased games that I already owned in the past, but I purchased it on GOG just because I wanted to have DRM-free versions of them. But you need to have some degree of self-awareness and realize that most games, in my case Japanese games especially, are never going to be supportive of the idea of DRM-free media. It's a very tough thing to convince gaming companies to get behind that, and when talking about console-exclusive games, this isn't even an option to begin with. Nintendo will never make their games DRM-free, and as long as that's the case, I'm gonna buy their physical cartridges, especially when I can just dump those games using my jailbroken Switch anyway. You know, ever since the whole Discovery controversy with PlayStation, there's been this widespread sentiment that piracy is now justified. And you know, I will say this, if you're one of the people that had your purchased content taken away from you, I think that you are morally entitled to pirate that same content. But let's make one thing clear, Blu-rays and DVDs are still very much alive, at least for some content. If you want to own your favorite TV shows and movies, if you want to back up your content without needing to break the law, you might be able to do so with optical media. And I really do hope that with these recent events like EA banning accounts that purchase It Takes Two on Steam or for using a VPN to play online games, Call of Duty banning accounts using Nvidia GeForce Now, PlayStation accidentally suspending people's accounts, I really hope that I don't ever have to make this point again. Following this, I'm going to take a break from YouTube for like a month or two, like I always do once in every 6 months. And the last message that I want to transmit to all of you is, if possible, always buy physical media. I understand there are some instances where this might not be optional. For example, for PC games, optical media is basically dead, and frankly speaking, physical games have always been kind of a joke on PC anyway, so I kind of don't mind the idea that the platform is exclusively digital. I'm also aware that some indie developers don't release physical copies because they can't afford it, as well as handle the logistics of selling thousands to millions of copies internationally. So distributing their games digitally might be the only way they can sell their games, which is understandable. And when it comes to online only games, honestly in those cases it really doesn't fucking matter if you buy the physical or digital version because you'll never own them at all. But if there's a game that has a physical release, doesn't require an internet connection, just buy that version. It is the most pro-consumer decision you can make in a world where these gaming companies are trying to take away your ownership of the games that you spend your hard-earned money on. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Take care.